Hello and welcome to the Ageless Pet Podcast. This is Dr. Carmine Bausoni.
And Dr. Gabriella Varco.
We are bringing together over 40 years of combined integrative veterinary experience to help pets achieve optimal health, reverse disease, and extend health span. We're going to use this platform as a way of reaching pet parents and veterinarians as we explore the science behind disease, wellness, and longevity.
So we're going to dive into the trends, the research, and use our experiences in practicing, because 40 years combined, that's a long time.
That's a long time.
Yeah. So we're going to use those 40 years. And we're going to have genuine discussions about wellness, healthcare within the veterinary profession. But we're also going to talk about human trends, because a lot of that trickles into the veterinary community.
Yeah, I think Dr. Varco and I are avid podcast listeners on the health space, human health space. So we're going to bring some of that knowledge and reading that we do as well. So that's going to be good. So what's integrative medicine? So we're two integrative veterinarians in San Diego, but what does that mean? What is integrative medicine? And integrative medicine is using both Western, or also called allopathic, or complementary or holistic therapies to achieve a successful outcome. So it's not using one or the other, and it's not taking away strengths from one or the other. It's using them together so that we can achieve what we need to achieve and actually, get optimal health.
Yeah, because I feel like, and I know you feel the same way, but using both, we're able to get better outcomes.
Yeah.
Yeah, not just going one way or the other.
Well, you got to think about this too. Right? Western medicine was really designed in an age of disease, in like bacterial and viral diseases, and it excels at doing that. It does that better than I think any other modality.
Yeah.
But it wasn't designed to treat chronic illnesses that we see in the 21st century associated with obesity or lifestyle and stuff like that.
Nice segue.
What's that?
Nice segue.
Oh, you like that?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's the thing. And so using something that excels at getting you healthy and keeping you healthy versus something that is used for acute diseases, and you use the two of them together and you can really achieve a difference. So Dr. Varco and I were just talking before this that a lot of what we see on the animal side is either one way or another. You're either very allopathic or Western, or very Eastern, and the two don't exist in the same world.
Yeah. Yeah, you're either one or the other. You can't be both, but we're both.
Right. I mean, like if you have to use an antibiotic, for God's sakes, use an antibiotic if you're septic, but don't use it just for fun, just because you think there might be an infection.
Right.
So anyway, so that's what we're doing, and that's what we're going to be focusing on over here for the remainder of our lives until we get to be 80 years of combined veterinary experience.
So what are we going to talk about today, Carmine?
We are going to talk about a really big topic. No pun intended. Exactly. Yeah.
We're going to talk about weight management and obesity in our pets. Kind of like you talked a little bit about. This is really important. And we have literature from years and years and years ago to show how important it is. And guess what? With all of the studies that have been done, we're not getting any thinner, and neither are our pets.
Yeah, and so this episode's not necessarily a sexy, groundbreaking topic. It's actually a lot of older research, some newer stuff. But it's so important in healthcare that if we don't address it and we do all the rest of the stuff, like we talk about whatever, like just say your dog has osteoarthritis or arthritis, and you're giving them, I don't care what you're giving them, Rimadyl, fish oil, you're doing acupuncture, you're doing rehab, and they're still really overweight, they're just not going to get better.
Yeah, we're fighting against this increased weight. So they're in a chronic inflammatory state. Right. There's more stress on the joints. Right. It impedes mobility and comfort.
Right. I mean, those are all, it's just at the end of the day, they just don't get as well and as better, as faster as they should when they're leaner, so that's a big deal. So that's why we wanted to hit this one today, just because I think that it is such a huge topic. And we just have to talk about it. We have to talk about the elephant in the room.
Yeah, and it's so important. Like, National Pet Obesity Awareness Day is October 9th of this year.
I swear she makes up some of those dates, but maybe it's true. But okay.
So what is obesity, Dr. Bassoni?
Oh boy, obesity is defined, so we have to use some definitions here. Obesity is defined as excessive body fat accumulation such that health may be adversely affected. And overweight is when a body is 10 to 15% optimal weight. Yeah.
Over optimal.
Over optimal, exactly. And then once you're considered obese, you're usually over 20% above optimal.
Yeah, so some statistics. The Association of Pet Obesity Prevention, they did a survey in 2022, and they saw that 59% of dogs were classified as overweight or obese, and that increased from 56% a few years prior.
Yeah, I don't think that's a surprise to any practicing veterinarian.
No.
And I think, unfortunately, it's been normalized, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that you see these overweight pets and people think they're normal, and they're not.
Yeah. If they're lean and they're ideal, people are like, oh my gosh, you don't feed your dog.
We get it all the time. I literally get it all the time for a dog who's athletic and lean.
Yeah.
That they ask, is my dog underweight? Is it okay? And I'm just like, oh my God, this dog is beautiful. Just keep it like that. And the reason why they're asking is because people on the street are saying your dogs are too thin. They're taking their dogs on a walk and your dog's too thin. You should make that dog get a little bit more weight. It doesn't look healthy. And
Right.
It's literally just the opposite.
Yeah, everybody loves the roly-poly puppy. They're like,
Right.
oh my gosh, the big Buddha belly, and it's so cute.
Right.
And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
man.
Or there's some breeds in particular that people like to look more, I don't know, I want to say masculine or tough or whatever, like the pit bulls or the English bulldogs or the Rottweilers, and they are typically really overweight. We do a lot of work for some rescue organizations, and we will see a lot of overweight bullies. You
Yeah.
know, so it's the norm. And as the statistic says, was a 59%. That was in 2022. So
Yeah.
I would bet for sure it's over 60% now.
Probably.
So,
Yeah.
but anyway, so.
So how can we tell if a dog's overweight? So what are things that we can do? Because everybody's like, oh, what should my dog weigh? And I can't play that game. I'm
No.
like the worst at that game. So I think we all use a certain technique.
Yeah, so I mean, in veterinary medicine, we use the body condition score. There's two scales, a 1 to 5, and I think the more accepted one is the 1 to 9 scale. So an ideal is 4 to 5 out of 9. 1 means that you're emaciated, and 9 means you are morbidly obese.
Yeah.
So, and you know, it's this is different than a BMI scale where they have a weight and a height, and they say what's normal, because that doesn't take into account like how much muscle you have, your bone density, or anything else like that. It just takes into literally a height and a weight.
Yeah.
And that's not fair for an athletic dog or an athletic human, for example. So we don't do that. What we do is we use certain factors, like we have to look and touch the dog. So you have to look at the dog from above and the side, and the dog's supposed to have a waist. So when you're looking at it from above, it's supposed to have a tuck. So there's supposed to be a chest, and it's supposed to taper down into a waist. And if they don't have that taper, then they just look like one big sausage.
Yeah.
And that's not right. So that's one thing. Obviously, looking out of the side, if there's a literal pendulous belly that's kind of hanging down, like cats are famous for that, right? The little saggy belly that swings back and forth when they walk. And then feeling them. You want to talk about feeling them?
Yeah, so you want to be able to feel the ribs but not see them. And you want to be able to like feel some of their bony landmarks but not have them protruding.
Right. So that's when you know they're too skinny. Like if you can feel their pelvic bones really easily, then you're like, oof, that's a little too skinny. But you should be able to feel them. It just shouldn't be poking out.
Right.
So...
Yeah, we're going to have a link in the show notes on body condition score charts so you can kind of try it at home, and for people that were trying to get their dogs to lose weight or their cats. I mean, we're going to focus more on dogs in this episode. Yeah. Cats, we don't want them to get below a 5 out of 9, but dogs, we want 4 to 5 out of 9. Yeah. But, you know, if they print it out and put it on their fridge or where they keep their pets' food, then they can kind of, it reminds them, and they're able to monitor that along with the help of their veterinarian.
Yeah, and if you, exactly, with your veterinarian. So if you don't know, if you're like, I think my dog's ideal, bring him into the vet, or next time you go to the vet, have them take a look at it. Because, I don't know, I would say the people who I tell them their pets are overweight, probably at least a quarter of them are shocked when I say
yeah.
that. And they think they're fine and they think they're perfect. I'm like, no, they're not.
Yeah, and I think just pointing it out too, and because of what we do, sometimes we're a little more, I know I'm more strict than some general practitioners out there, because this is like literally all I do every day.
Right.
And I'm looking at body condition score, I'm looking at muscle condition score, how well muscled they are, because that plays a role. And then, they'll be like, well, everybody said that my dog's fine. And I'm like, well.
Yeah, and then we're going to be a little bit more stricter because both Gabby and I are both acupuncturists, and we do deal with a lot of mobility issues as well. Dr. Varco's also a boarded specialist in sports medicine and rehabilitation, so that's what she does all day, every day. So, keeping them active and lean is so important in their well-being and their recovery from injury that it can't be overstated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some research on obesity. We're going to talk about a landmark study. It was the first ever lifelong canine diet restriction study, and it followed Labrador retrievers throughout their lifetime. It was conducted from 1987 to 2001, so really long time. And they basically had two groups of Labradors, and they found that the dogs that ate 25% fewer calories than their litter mates had an ideal body condition, and that led to a longer life. So this study showed that the dog's median lifespan can be extended by 15%, which for Labradors retrievers, it's like almost 2 years. And that was just by staying lean. That was it.
Yeah. And, this is the Purina lifetime study, right? So they're fed Purina dog food, which
we can assume.
Yeah, we can assume that. We can assume that, they probably got treats, et cetera. I doubt they just got Purina, because that would be amazing. But either way, it doesn't matter. 1.8 years or 15%, that's a crazy number.
Yeah.
So, but we'll talk about that more later. But let's go to the materials and methods just so you can really understand this as well. And so, again, an older study completed in 2001. So it's, it's an over 20-year-old study. But as we said earlier, we're still going up, from 56% of patients that were, or pets that were overweight, to 59. So that's still going up. Anyways, there were 48 8-week-old Labradors from 7 different litters, which were paired by their litter and gender and body weight, and then randomly assigned to control or restricted fed groups. And so the control group were allowed to eat a certain amount more than the lean fed or restricted groups. The restricted or lean fed group adds 75% of what their paired litter mates ate. So that's, it's significantly lower, obviously. But these dogs were not kept super, super lean. So the control dogs were considered overweight with an average BCS, or body condition score, of 6.8 out of 9.
Which is not out of the question. We see a lot of that.
Oh, sevens. I probably write 7 a lot. I don't know, maybe 50% of the time I write 7. So 6.8 out of 9 compared to the calorie restricted dogs who had a BCS of 4.5 out of 9. Remembering that 4 or 5 out of 9 is ideal.
Yeah.
So
not that big of a leap there.
6s are like, if you have a 6 on a dog, you're like, okay, you're a little overweight, let's work on that. But 7 is real. 7's like, okay, yeah, we really got to lose weight. And these guys were 6.8, so they're up there.
Yeah. So the results from this study showed that the median lifespan, so that's just the age at which 50% of the dogs in the group died, was 11.2 years for the control group versus 13 years for the lean-fed dogs.
Crazy.
And one of the things I also want to point out is that not only did this study show that these leaner dogs had a longer lifespan, but they also had a longer health span.
Right.
Because it looked at when the dogs began requiring medical treatment for these chronic conditions. And so it showed that if you restrict their calories and keep them lean, and we're not talking about starvation, we're just talking about a healthy diet restriction, it's going to affect when they start developing some of these conditions and show signs of aging. So by the age of 10, only 3 of the lean-fed dogs, the body condition score of 4.5 out of 9, had passed away, compared to 7 of the control dogs, so the overweight dogs. And at the end of the 12th year, 11 of the lean dogs were alive, but only one of the overweight
That's
dogs
huge.
was alive. I mean, that makes me really sad.
Yeah, and these are Labradors, right? So at the end of the 12th year, only one was still alive of the 6.8 body condition score dogs, so the overweight dogs. Only one. And, I'd pose a question to everyone out there who thinks that 12 years old is an adequate lifespan for a Labrador.
Right.
I don't think anyone does.
No.
I think everyone wants their lab to live 14, 15 years old, right? So,
at least, yeah.
And only one were alive at 12.
Yeah, so 25% of the lean dogs made it to 13 and a half years old.
Yeah.
None of the overweight dogs live that long.
Yeah. And of course, we're not talking about, we do know that labs have certain disease conditions that may shorten their lifespans, right? I mean, genetically. So we know that, but still taking that into account, this is apples to apples, or comparing litter mates to litter mates and labs to labs. And 50, it's just, that's a 25% will live to 13.5 of the lean fed, and zero, zilch to 13.5. I mean, of the control groups lived at 13.5. So everybody wants their dogs to live longer. I mean, this study right off the bat just shows you the number one most important thing you can do for your dog, period. Doesn't matter what you feed them. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how much exercise you do. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, you can kill them with kindness and kill them with love, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, look, I'm Italian. I grew up, my parents are immigrants, so I'm all about food, so I get it, but we just have to be aware of what we're doing, and that the manja mentality might not be the best.
I know, not for our dogs, especially our Labradors, because we know they have that genetic alteration where they always feel hungry, and they have slower metabolic rate.
Exactly.
So this study also showed that when 50% of the dogs needed treatment for chronic conditions was 12 years with the lean dogs, but 9.9 years for the overweight dogs. So again, starting treatment for chronic conditions even earlier, and that could be anything from Western, Eastern, both, but regardless, now we're putting time and money into something additional that potentially could have been prevented or prolonged.
Right. I mean, and, for people like us who are in the field, when we talk about chronic conditions, that means a lot of stuff. But for the general person out there, I mean, I think the number one thing that people think about is arthritis. You know, so these dogs are having to be treated for arthritic conditions. They're having to be treated for hormonal conditions, right? So hypothyroidism is a big one in the dogs. So like I said, osteoarthritis, diabetes, Cushing's disease,
cancer,
the big C. So, but all of these are the chronic conditions we're talking about. So a lot of people just think of hypothyroidism as no big deal, and it's not a huge deal, but it is a chronic condition. So is osteoarthritis, so is diabetes, so is Cushing, so is so many other skin problems. I didn't even talk about skin problems, because that's definitely more prevalent in overweight dogs than it is on thinner dogs. So
and heart disease, internal organ dysfunction. I mean, the list goes on.
Yeah, so it's just a huge list, a huge laundry list of problems that we don't think about, but they're all tied to weight.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that weight also affected what they looked like as they aged. So they found that the lean dogs versus the overweight dogs had less signs of aging. So the overweight dogs had more graying of the muzzle, impaired mobility, reduced activity, because that goes hand in hand, at an earlier age than the lean dogs. So that's also,
Yeah, and I think that's very obvious for us in the field, that you will see the overweight dogs age quicker. Now, of course, some dogs have that, unfortunate, they're 6 years old and their muzzle's already graying. That's just a genetic thing.
Yeah, like the 20-year-old that's going bald.
Yeah.
I'm talking humans.
I know. I was just thinking about that. Yeah.
You have a nice head of hair there. I'm not talking about you.
Yeah, thank you. But
you have a full,
yes. Luscious locks.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, even in my vet school class, I mean, gosh, there was probably a quarter of the guys who were going bald, in our 20s. I was like, oh my God.
Man.
So I got some good genes on that side, but some other not so great genes. But hey, look, we work through those. It's okay. There was also another study done too. It's a longitudinal cohort study that looked at lifelong diet restriction and radiographic evidence of hip osteoarthritis. So big words, but basically means it shows that it was a study looking at how heavy or light your dog was, and if we took x-rays of the dogs, what its hips looked like.
Yeah.
So the restricted fed dogs, the ones that, didn't eat as much, obviously, and had the leaner body condition, had a lower prevalence and a later onset of hip arthritis than the other dogs, the overweight dogs. So the evidence was shown at 6 years of age on the overfed or overweight dogs, and 12 years of age on the restricted fed group.
Yeah. So the leaner dogs,
that's effing nuts.
That's crazy.
That's nuts. 12 years versus 6 years.
And we know that clinical signs and discomfort and changes in the joint are going to show up before we have radiographic or x-ray evidence.
Right.
So imagine it's probably even earlier than that, I'm sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know that I don't exactly know the numbers now, but there's these new drugs that are coming out for osteoarthritis in both cats and dogs. And, I know I was presented with these numbers, but I think even in cats, I'm going to say it wrong, so drug company rep, forgive me, but I think it was something like you can detect osteoarthritis in cats as early as 5 years of age, or something like 25% of cats at that age. And that's mind-boggling to me, because I don't think I would recognize that in cats, and it's the same, if not more, probably more in dogs because of our wonderful breeding that we've done to some of these species. I mean, they're cute, don't get me wrong. I have a bulldog, so you guys can probably immediately unfollow me right now, so I just said I owned a bulldog, but it is a rescue and has lots of problems. So that being said,
I have a Labrador, so weight is a big conversation in our house.
And he looks really good. We've talked about him not looking good in the past, but he looks great now.
I know.
And by the way, my bulldog is kept very lean because she has hip arthritis, knee arthritis, low back arthritis, and has some urinary incontinence issues that my wife loves it to change the diapers. Anyways, though, but so it just if I kept that dog even a little overweight, she couldn't even move. So, anyways, but so that's a pretty impressive study. 6 years for the overweight dogs and 12 years for the restricted fed. So restricted fed, again, remember, we're not talking about they're thin, they're appropriately sized.
Right.
So they have kind of like the runner's body or something. They look good. They're athletic. They don't look like flabby doors dogs.
And there was a 2018 study that supported the Purina lifetime. What was that? They showed up to 2.5 years.
Yeah, so it's even more.
Yeah, and that was more recent. That was 2018.
Yeah, so 1.8 versus 2.5. And then as far as humans, I mean, think about that. That's a crazy thing. I don't know what. It's always hard for me when people say, "Well, how old is my dog in human years or whatever?" But because it's variable depending on the breed and the size of the dog. But I think a generally accepted thing is maybe 7 years, sometimes 5 years.
Yeah.
But even if you use the lower side of that, 5 years for a human, that would be 10 years. You're going to gain 10 years if you just thought about your future self.
Yep.
And thought about, man, I want to live longer. But really, no one just wants to live longer. Everyone wants to live healthier and
feel good.
What's the term they use? Like health span, right? That's the term. So everyone wants a good health span. They don't want to just live and be in their wheelchairs watching talk radio until their 90s. They want to be able to be moving and doing things.
Playing pickleball.
Oh my God. Yes, playing pickleball. Love
Which
you,
has been
pickleballers.
shown
It's
to
great.
be
Pickleball?
A factor in longevity, racket sports, including pickleball.
Oh yeah.
A study came out.
I did see that. They said contact sports were the worst. Even I don't want to go into that, but yeah, I saw that study as well. So does pickleball really count as a racquetball sport though? Yeah, it does.
Yeah. You got your racket and your little ball, and there's a little net. It can be a lot of exercise. It can really. I've played.
Yeah. not
I mean,
a
it's
lot
no
of
racquetball,
exercise.
but I mean, it's getting people moving.
Well, hey man, if he gets you out there and moving, I think the other thing with pickleball or anything is community, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you're out there and you're joking and playing and you're outside most of the time, so that's fantastic, just being outside. So
yeah, social interactions are huge.
yeah. So I think that's amazing. But I mean, those are some studies that we just shared. I mean, like, God, 1.8 years or 2.5 years, and those are huge, huge numbers, and it's just so hard for me because you can't say it enough or as many times in a day as you would like to. That weight is so important.
Yeah, and it's not, I understand the struggle, and I know that clients are really trying, so we're not trying to point fingers. I know it's like really hard, but the big picture here is that overweight dogs live shorter lives and they're less healthy.
Right. I mean, you can't sum it up any simpler than that.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what it is.
Yeah, and there's a lot of factors. I mean, we were talking about this before the show started today, too. It's, some of it might have to do, I mean, first of all, we're obviously now out of the COVID crisis. Obviously, COVID's still around. But what happened to all of us when we were in COVID? We either took up one of three hobbies. We either started cooking, gardening, or working out. But we were all isolated. What's that?
A lot of sourdough was being made.
A lot of tomatoes were being grown. So, but we took up those things, but we were also isolated, right? So we did not get to see people. We were probably watching a whole lot more TV than we should have been. So our activity went lower and probably ate a bit more sourdough bread.
Maybe.
I'm thinking. But yeah, so, I mean, I think some of the factors, if we look at these things, and by the way, if anyone has other factors, please, contact us through the show and through the website, et cetera, to let us know what you think your factors for dogs being overweight or yourself being overweight are. That would be kind of fun. But obviously inactivity.
Right. We talked about just the opposite of that, busy lifestyle, right? COVID made a lot of people work less, but it also made a lot of people work more.
Right.
And our lives
veterinarians included, by the way.
Yeah.
We were all working like nuts.
We all worked more and
burnout.
Yeah. Burnout's a real thing. That'd be a good topic to touch on in the future, but we're more busy. We have less time to exercise. We have less time to go out and walk our dogs or play with our dogs. Right. So everybody's less active, and that definitely plays a role.
Yeah, and I think culture is changed too, right? So, we know that, back in the 70s and stuff, I mean, I think if you had a dog who slept on the bed, that would be like weird. Yeah. You're a weirdo. But I think I saw something like 60% of pet owners have their pets sleep with them, which I couldn't do, but a lot of people do. Do you do that?
I do.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's a big dog.
Yeah. Well, my sister's dog sleeps with us too. There was a point in time where I had my 2 dogs and 2 foster dogs, and all 4 of us slept on the same bed.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
No, I get too hot.
Well,
there's no way I can do that.
My husband, myself, and the 4 dogs.
Yeah.
There was all of us together.
God, there's no way. And then, and there's so many factors. I do think that we would be wrong. So what I was going to say about social factors is that, these pets are more like humans. So then when we're seeing that we are getting more overweight, is it really a surprise that our dogs are getting more overweight?
No.
Yeah. So, and then the over-processed foods, obviously the dry foods are a big factor.
Over-treating.
Over-treating. That's a huge one, right? You always say, like, what % of calories should come from treats?
10%. But that also includes any supplements that have calories, anything you wrap your pills in. You really have to look at it as 90% of your calories should come from your balanced diet.
Right.
And then anything extra.
Yeah. I always say that your treat should be viewed as like your ice cream. I mean, I don't think most people are eating desserts every night. Maybe they are, but I don't think so. And so your dogs really shouldn't be getting treated excessively either.
Yeah.
So just think about that. There's treats have a lot of calories, and we're going to cover this in our next episode, but treats have a ton of calories, and it is always, always, always the overlooked part of everything. Because I think that people come in and they're like, I feed my dog X cup of food twice a day. And of course, this is a dry food I'm referring to. But you could also change it to a home cooked or raw food diet as well. You can say either cups or pounds of food, but they never tell me how many treats they give. They don't quantify that. They never quantify that, do they?
Hardly.
Yeah.
You have to really dig for it. I've created some food log sheets to hand out to clients so that we could be like, okay, what are you feeding in the morning? Are you using a measuring cup? Are you using a food scale? Like, how are you quantifying the amount of food? Same for the evening, any in between meals, and then anything extra.
Right.
And they have to write it down.
Yeah.
It's like a journal.
Oh my God. It's like Life Sum or a Noom for pets, huh? You're going to have an app soon. You should have an app.
We should.
Yeah. No, that's not for me, but that's good.
So many factors here. Socioeconomic
that's
plays
a big
role.
one.
And there was a study that came out looking at socioeconomic factors and obesity. And obviously that plays a big role when you're lower in the financial scale. That increases the percentage of weight.
Right.
Humans and there's, we could go into the human side, like food deserts, depending on where you live, and healthy options and this and that. But that does trickle down to our pets. Yeah,
and I think a lot of that trickles down to probably the quality of food that we're feeding them, right? So we might be feeding them lower quality food, et cetera, and more dry food, less healthy food, since it's expensive or hard to get, There was a study that came out with humans I was listening to on the way into work, and I can't remember the exact thing, but it was something to the effect that over-processed foods have been linked to, I can't remember how many serious diseases, like 12 different serious diseases that shorten lifespan. And I was just like, really? That's shocking. Shocking. So, everyone knows that. Everybody knows that that's a problem, but we keep eating the Cheetos and we keep eating our organic potato chips that we buy from Whole Foods. I know. They're organic. Okay. Thank God they're healthy, right? So anyways, but those are some of the factors. But I think that, like I said, on the next podcast, we'll talk more about things to look at, but it's a big one.
Yeah. So, let's sum it up. Big picture, Doctor. What do we think here? What are we telling our listeners?
I think we just have to tell our listeners to pay attention to their dog's weight, their body condition score, and really look at them all the time. We should be feeling their ribs. We should be looking at their bellies, and we should try to keep them lean. That's the result of the study and the results of everything,
Yeah. And here's a groundbreaking statement. A University of Wisconsin professor of medicine, and he's an expert in diet restriction. He said, and he's referring back to, the previous studies that we were talking about. From this study, we can extrapolate that large mammals, including humans, can potentially live longer and healthier through diet restriction. Yeah.
Just shocking.
Mind-blowing.
It is interesting, though. So we just mentioned about how pets have arthritis at 6 years versus 12 years or whatever. But what we didn't talk about, what we didn't say is, okay, so your dog has arthritis, okay? And it was overweight at 6 and now it has arthritis. Does that mean your dog is doomed for a life of pain and difficulty moving around? No, it absolutely doesn't. We know what, I'm going to ask Dr. Varco a very tough question. What's the gold standard in osteoarthritis treatment in dogs?
Weight loss.
Oh my gosh, she nailed it. So exactly. So that's it. So it's not fish oil. It's not acupuncture. It's not Rimadyl. It's not Librela. It's weight loss, period, end of story, exclamation point.
If they're overweight. We have to.
Thank you.
Yes. If they're overweight, which, as we talked about, most of them are. Weight loss is number one.
And obviously there's genetic factors. Like I said, my bulldog, bulldogs are all born with hip dysplasia. So they all have bad hips. And, my dog at 2 years old has arthritis because of the lovely breeding that they did before we rescued her. But that's the factor. I mean, so if they're overweight, if they're a body condition score of 6.8, 7, 6, if you get them down to a 4.5, you're going to alleviate so many of those clinical signs.
Yeah.
So I think we can all talk about cases, but I mean, so many of them. But I remember one chocolate lab that came in and was having difficulty getting up, and x-rayed them and x-rayed the dog, not the people, and found that the dog had hip arthritis. Told the owner, and the owner she's a dental hygienist, and she was literally started crying in the room. And I was like, oh my goodness, because she thought it meant that her dog was going to die, earlier and stuff. Literally, I told her, I said, well, if your dog loses 10 pounds, it's going to be a huge difference. And her and her husband this was their baby, and they did it. And the dog went from, I think it was like a 7 to probably below a 5, and we never treated that dog with anything else. And that dog died of nothing related to its hips, and lived a very long life. I think that over 13 years of age. Wow. I think maybe even 14. So we see that all the time. So it's just such an important factor that, if they have osteoarthritis, treatment for osteoarthritis in the overweight dog is weight loss. It's the only thing we can do. Everything else is helpful. Don't get me wrong, but you get that weight off of them, and that's just it's a game changer.
Yeah, and it's free.
Yeah,
essentially,
free. It is.
I mean, essentially, but it takes work.
Yeah,
it doesn't. It's not easy. We can appreciate that, but it also isn't spending a ton of monies on diagnostics and pharmaceuticals and supplements and therapies. It's,
Yeah, Dr. Varco and I always talk about that weight loss is free and other things aren't. It's not free? Acupuncture. It's not free? So a client came in and they had 2 overweight dogs, and they came in for testosterone therapy to make their dog stronger and so they can live longer and beat their hip arthritis. And they're both really obese, not overweight. And I literally said to them, what doesn't cost money? Weight loss. You know what does cost money? Hormone replacement therapy. So, but anyway, but that's a whole different thing. So,
well, we summed it up.
Yeah.
We're going to have we're going to post the references and the body condition scoring charts in our show notes. And the body condition score chart will be on our Instagram page.
Yeah. And then we'll have our own personal bios on our show notes as well as our website. So follow us as well there. So don't forget to follow us after listening to this podcast so you can get the next ones that drop. Our plan is to drop them every other week.
Yeah. So we'll see you soon.
Yeah. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.